Today, we go over some things to consider when using our steel flange post to mount your iron fence on top of a walking surface or wall. Hey everyone, Jason from Iron Fence Shop. If your project calls for mounting your iron fence on top of a concrete slab or wall, then you cannot use our standard posts that get concreted 2 to 3 feet in the ground. You'll need to utilize our surface mount flange posts that allow you to bolt the post down rather than concrete it in. So today I wanted to go over some considerations and limitations on using the surface mount flange posts, as well as go over what hardware you need to connect the post to your wall or walking surface. I'm going to split this video into 5 parts. 1. Flange posts on walking surfaces. 2. Flange posts on wall top and curb surfaces. 3. Spacing and placement considerations when using flange posts. 4. Recommended anchor bolt hardware and tools. 5. Alternatives to using flange posts for walls and slabs. Let's start with using the flange posts on a walking surface. The ideal surface these posts are meant to be mounted onto is a concrete slab. So if you're mounting on top of a patio, breezeway, pool deck, or some type of walking surface, it should ideally be made up of solid concrete. You also want to make sure your concrete slab is at least 4 inches thick and in good condition. You don't want concrete that is heavily cracked, spalling, or sloped. Here are some walking surfaces we don't recommend using the flange posts on. Blacktop or asphalt is too soft to mount on top of and won't hold the anchor hardware. For that application, you'll want to dig the asphalt up, set your post 2 to 3 feet deep in concrete, and then pour new asphalt around the post afterwards. Pavers or stone-top walking surfaces are also a bad idea to mount the flange posts on top of. They could pull free or pop up if the post is impacted or pulled on. Unlike a solid slab, individual surface pieces can pull free or move over time. It is better to pull the pavers up or stones, set the post 2 to 3 feet deep in ground and concrete, and then cut your pavers or stones to fit around the posts. We also don't typically recommend mounting the flange posts on top of a wood walking surface like decks either. Deck boards are simply too thin and could crack or pull free if the post is impacted or pulled on. Now, if you are willing to pull up the deck boards and build reinforcements into the frame or deck so that all 4 anchors for each post are in that framing, it could be possible to make that work. But given how much work and construction that takes, most folks elect not to go that route. So for walking surfaces like pool decks, patios, sidewalks, and driveways, a minimum 4-inch thick concrete slab in good condition is going to be the ideal surface to use the flange posts on. Now let's shift gears and talk about using the flange posts on top of walls or something elevated like curbing. This is a little trickier to give advice on since there's so many different types of materials and construction methods that can be used for these walls and curbs. If you're installing the fence on top of a wall, it becomes more case-by-case basis than hard and fast rule. We do recommend calling us to go over your specific application to be safe. However, there are some general guidelines we can go over when using the flange post on top of a wall or curb. Ideally, the top of your wall is going to be solid. By solid, that means we don't want a bunch of exposed brick or stone mortar joints that you can't put an anchor into. If your wall is capped, you'll want that cap to be at least 3 to 4 inches thick with as few joints as possible and securely affixed to the wall. You don't want an impact of the fence or post to pop your wall cap loose. The width of your wall top is going to be key. With our 5-inch square flange post, your wall generally needs to be at least 10 to 12 inches wide on top. That can vary based on the anchor you end up choosing and the wall type, but any narrower than that and you run the risk of the wall top cracking and breaking if you drill your anchor holes too close to the edge. Specifications vary on the edge to anchor spacing that different anchor bolts use. However, there are 2 guidelines we see pop up the most often. First is that you want 4 inches from the edge of your wall to the middle of your anchors. The second is the width of 5 drilled holes away from the edge of your wall to your anchor. For our 3/8 inch anchor recommendation, that would be 1 7/8 inch from edge to anchor hole. Again, these are loose rule of thumb numbers. Always be sure to check the recommendation on the packaging of the anchor bolts you decide to use. Moving on to our third topic, let's discuss spacing and placement considerations. We touched on this already with our wall top width discussion prior, but what about when this is a ground slab surface mount application? Much like the wall tops, you will need to bring your flange post far enough from the slab edge so that you don't run into cracking issues. However, that may take away more usable space on the surface than you're comfortable with. Let's switch to an overhead example shot to show what I mean. Let's say the end of our table here represents our slab we're mounting on. In order to mount our flange post, the anchors are recommending 4 inches in from the edge. What this does is shift your flange 4 inches to the middle of the first anchor hole. However, that also means that our fence line at the center of the post is now 6 inches from the slab edge here and 8.5 inches into the other side of the flange. What you need to determine is if you have that room to lose on your walking surface. While losing a few inches of the surface edge may sound small, once you start putting planters and patio furniture out there, you may lament the loss of that usable space. So keep that in mind that using surface mount posts is going to take away from your usable space on a walking surface or slab. Moving into our fourth topic, let's discuss recommended anchor bolt hardware and tools. Since there's so much variation in the construction and surface materials used for walking and wall surfaces, we don't sell the anchor hardware. However, it's something you can easily find at any home store. There are some flange post specific tools you'll want to consider too. When installing the anchors into concrete and masonry work, it's key you have a drill driver with a hammer setting and use a masonry style drill bit. Hammer drills will normally have some sort of notation or setting like this on the body of the tool. Masonry bits will usually be very long and have this special end on them. They are typically sold individually. If you try using a standard drill with no hammer setting and a drill bit meant for wood and metal, it will just spin forever, making zero progress or burn out the bit. Now let's shift gears to the anchor bolts themselves. While there are lots of different types of concrete masonry anchor bolts out there, I'm going to focus on two of the most common and easiest to find: the concrete wedge anchor and what are commonly referred to as Tapcon type anchors. Let's start with the concrete wedge anchor. These are also commonly referred to as thunder studs or redhead stud anchors. If you're installing into solid concrete, these have always been my preference. You'll drill your hole into the surface to the specified depth and then hammer in the bolt. Be sure to get an anchor shorter than the total depth of your surface. If your drilled hole punches through the bottom of the slab or cap, it loses its ability to hold tight. When hammering them in, I recommend leaving the nut on and sticking up so you don't damage the threads. You then take the nut and washer off, put your flange post down, and put the washer and bolt back on to tighten them. As you tighten down the threads, the little collar will expand and grip the sides of the hole. You want it snug, but don't tighten it so much that you break the concrete and start spinning the bolt in the hole. Our other option is the Tapcon style bolt. These will often be blue like this, have large threads, and a hex head you can put a socket on. If you're installing into something more porous like brick or stone, then these are a better anchor option to use. You will pre-drill a hole in the surface material. Be sure to get a Tapcon anchor shorter than the total depth of your surface. Moving on to our fifth and final topic, let's discuss alternatives to using the flange post for your iron fence. Sometimes using the surface mount flange post just isn't a good option for many of the reasons we've covered here. Too narrow of a wall top, concrete in poor condition, wrong type of building materials, or flanges just taking up too much space on the slab. So if you can't use a flange post to mount your fence, what alternatives do you have? The simplest alternative is going to be burying your posts in ground, in concrete, like a normal fence installation. While flange posts and anchors can be very strong, they pale in strength comparison to 2 to 3 feet of post buried in concrete. If your walking surface slab is surrounded by grass or mulch beds, simply mounting the fence outside of the slab in the ground alleviates any cracking concerns or losing usable space. If you have a retaining wall with soil or grass near the top of the wall on one side, you can put the fence in there with ground posts as well. Just be careful digging, as retaining walls may have gravel, mesh, or other buried structural and drainage things hiding behind the wall. If burying the fence in ground isn't an option, you can also look into another one called core drilling. This does require a specialty tool and sometimes a professional. With core drilling, a specialty drill is used to drill out a cup or hole in the wall or slab surface. This hole will typically be only a few inches deep and not break through the bottom of the slab or wall. The posts are then concreted into these shallow holes with a strong specialty mix. Core drilling gives a very strong bond and clean appearance without any flanges or exposed anchor hardware. Sometimes you have a setup that a fence simply can't mount on top of safely, and you're gonna have to look at alternatives. If you're in the construction phase of your concrete surface or wall, I highly recommend talking to that contractor to see what they recommend. You can also give us a call here at Iron Fence Shop to discuss your setup and see if we have any recommendations for you. Hopefully this video has helped explain where and how you can safely use our surface mount flange posts and install your iron fencing gates. Be sure to check us out here at ironfenceshop.com. Want to see some other considerations when installing your fence posts next to various structures? Check out this video we did. If you have any other questions, you can shoot us an email at sales@ironfenceshop.com or give us a call at 800-261-2729. We look forward to hearing from you.